The Schulthess Residence. I am architect Raúl Álvarez. I left Cuba as a teenager to study architecture at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York from 1947 to 1951. Most of my classmates were veterans of the Second World War. Several Cuban architects were then abroad studying, working, and gaining exposition to the modern architecture style that was flourishing in other countries. At that time, Europe was being rebuilt, especially Germany and England. Modern buildings were being designed and built by Le Corbusier, Oscar Niemeyer, Walter Gropius, and many others. Publications and books, all in English, had photos and articles of new projects being done all over the world. Le Corbusier's phrase, "Form follows function," became famous. Those of us from Cuba that had studied abroad were enjoying the magazines with the pictures of new buildings and new construction techniques like prefabrication, precast concrete, post-tensioning, and the integration with the steel structures. The high price of sugar that happened after the Second World War and the advent of tourism were fueling the Cuban economy, developing these investments in buildings. It was a time of adventure, experimentation, and not looking back to the past. While revalidating at Habana University, I had the unique opportunity of creating the design program for the National Theater of Cuba at the offices of architects Arroyo and Menendez. The program emphasized one large theater for opera, ballet, and concerts, and an experimental theater where the person sitting on the last row would be able to see a tear on the face of the artist on the stage. In early January of 1954, after 2 years of National Theater construction time, Nicolás Arroyo offered to increase my salary and make me a partner of his firm. We discussed an alternate possibility of me staying in the theater position of project architect of the National Theater in the mornings with no increase in salary, and that condition would allow me to open my own small office to operate in the afternoons. Architect Arroyo agreed to my request. My brother Pepe and I had recently inherited an office building in Old Habana that had a vacant office space, just the right size for my private architectural office plans. At that time, Hans Noel was working with me on the interior design of the National Theater. He volunteered to help me with interiors of my new office, offering me selections of furniture and fabrics at an excellent price. Architect Hector Tate of Welton Becket and Associate Architects was the project architect for the Havana Hilton Hotel. At that time, I helped him with the contractors of the hotel on several occasions, becoming very good friends. Hector offered to set up the operation of my architectural office like another Welton Becket office, which would then become the most modern architectural office of Cuba and in Latin America. The interiors of my office were completed by early December of 1954. On December 20th, we had an open house to inaugurate my office. Among several construction people that I invited Hans Annesberg, who was the representative of Victor Plate Glass. A few days later, he called me to let me know that he had given my name to a neighbor, a Swiss national, who was looking for a local architect to work in the project of his house that was being designed by a Californian architect. A few days later, I received a letter typed in sepia color, all in uppercase of 2 different heights, and a signature also in sepia, from architect Richard Neutra. The letter had 2 pages of questions regarding construction materials, including special information on waterproofing and paint. My response letter to Neutra consisted on 6 pages, typed on both sides. A few days after sending the letter to Neutra's office, I received a call in English from Alfred de Schulthess, asking me to meet him at the world-famous Floridita Bar and Restaurant in the Prado section of Habana, the following Wednesday at 1 p.m. Complying with his request, I was at the bar very close to 1 p.m. At this time, the bar was almost empty since most customers had already gone to the restaurant area. A tall man at the end of the bar was there, and I started walking in his direction. And when I was very close to him, I asked him, "Are you Alfred de Schulthess?" He nodded affirmatively. I said, "I am Raúl Álvarez." Almost immediately he said, "Isn't your father coming?" I told him that I was the architect selected by Richard Neutra, and he suggested to go to the restaurant. A few months later, I learned from Mr. de Schulthess that as soon as he got to his office, he called architect Neutra and told him, "Alvarez is a baby." But Richard Neutra reminded him that he was the architect selected by him for his house, and that Alvarez was the best qualified of all architects being considered as local architect for the project, that we both would make the best team. Sometime later, we received the Neutra plans for the Schulthess house, for a totally wood house. We also received Neutra's book of wood details as part of a very detailed wood construction. I met with my structural engineer Sergio Breiterman to analyze the wood structure. His comment to me was, "This house cannot resist a hurricane." He carefully explained how the house would be falling apart under the wind forces and how the destruction of the house would occur. We met with Mr. de Schulthess to discuss the dangers of building the house, assuring him that a new house of reinforced concrete that would design would maintain all the proportions of the original house, and it would be a much better, safer solution. Mr. de Schulthess asked us to notify Richard Neutra of this change. All interior partitions would be of concrete block. The roof would also be of reinforced concrete with 2 finished coatings of cementitious waterproofing in lieu of bituminous layers. It was not easy to maintain all proportions, especially substituting steel beams covered in wood. Our structural engineer, Breiteman, designed beams with heavier reinforcing bars to reduce the number of bars in order to facilitate the concrete mix reaching all surfaces. Richard Neutra wanted to emphasize the contrast between concrete beams and the underside of the second floor slab. For that purpose, he specified a concrete retardant that was not acceptable on the test we made. General contractor Pablo Ortiz suggested making a sample with an extra inch of concrete under the bottom reinforcing bars and using a metal chisel to create a much heavier texture. The result was excellent. On his visit to the house, Richard Neutra, after spending considerable time inspecting all areas, said, "We could never build a house like this in the United States." The exterior wall of the second floor facing the house entrance was designed by architect Neutra to be covered with corrugated metal panels. The Schulthess and I thought that it was too industrial looking, and we substituted with wood panels of Saqui, a native Cuban wood species that was weather resistant. Neutra's original design of the house was for a flat terrain. However, the site sloped as much as 7 feet in a short distance and would have required considerable fill material. Structural engineer Breiterman wanted to avoid uneven settling and cracks. He suggested creating a basement area at the end of the house. The Schulthess decided to use the new area as a wine cellar, and the end result of the work on the house was a beautiful building, a contemporary and modern house that has resisted the weather of the tropics and has provided an example of modernist architecture for more than 60 years. The best comment I received have been from a letter that Alfred de Schulthess sent me on December 10, 2006. He quoted, "I remember very well our first meeting at the Floridita. We had now and then little disagreements with Professor Neutra. I later realized that these decisions were always the good ones. I cannot remember a single disagreement between yourself and me, and I certainly know that your influence and knowledge were of great importance to the success of the building." Ambassador Lewis sent me several recent photos. The house is still a typical Neutra house. On August 30 of 1959, the National College of Architects of Cuba awarded the Schulthess House the Gold Medal Award of the year 1958, the highest award given by the College of the Best Project of the Year.